I found out. My stepdaughter only pretended to care about me for my money, and her real dad orchestrated the whole plan. So I severed all contact, and the next time we met was in court with my legal team. Be me, 42-year-old Marcus, living what most people would call the perfect life. Everything looks great from the outside, like one of those perfect social media posts. Miami became my home several years ago. Never regretted the move. Eternal sunshine and ocean beaches, perfect for my lifestyle. Work as a project manager for a major construction firm, making good money, more than enough. Live in a prestigious area. Drive an expensive car. Zero sacrifices on the things I enjoy. But here's the thing that really matters. Raised my stepdaughter Victoria since she was 4. Her biological dad Robert dipped before her 2nd birthday. No calls, no support, no visits. Absolutely nothing. Married her mom Diana when Victoria was 6. From that point on, I stepped in. Not because it was my responsibility, but because I loved Diana, and honestly, I grew to love Victoria too. Was there for everything. Helping her learn multiplication tables, building her first bike, staying awake in the hospital room when she had appendicitis. Victoria never had to call me Dad. But she chose to. That meant the world to me. Life went on. Eventually, Robert faded out of conversations completely. Victoria stopped waiting by the window, hoping he'd show up. Diana and I built our own little family, the kind I was proud of. Over the years, that trust grew into something solid and real. Through scraped knees, heartbreaks, and school dances, I was the dad standing by her side, fiercely proud of the young woman she was becoming, taught her responsibility and integrity, poured years into mentoring her at the construction business, knowing one day she'd inherit it all. Not because she had to, but because she genuinely loved it, just like I did. Our bond wasn't perfect. We argued, disagreed, and drove each other crazy, like every father and daughter, but it was honest and unbreakable, or so I believed. Then just a few months ago, Victoria and her husband Ryan were over for dinner. Dinner was quiet, cozy even, until Victoria casually dropped a grenade on the conversation. She said without looking up, "Oh, Robert messaged me." Diana nearly choked, coughing sharply into her napkin. My heart pounded instantly, every muscle in my body tightening, like I just sensed a threat in my own home. Robert, the guy who ghosted when Victoria was a kid, now casually strolling back in through social media. I turned to Victoria. "You didn't think that was worth mentioning before now?" "He just wanted to apologize for leaving," she said defensively. "Apparently he's been following me for a while. Just didn't want to interfere," she added, using air quotes like she was already defending him. "Apologies come easy when the hard work is already done," I said. Maybe a little too harshly. But I knew exactly what Robert was doing. He was sniffing around because Victoria was successful and settled now. People like him always circle back. We argued briefly, but Victoria insisted she had it under control. "I'm just talking to him, that's it," she promised. I didn't believe her. Neither did Diana, but we had to let it go. Victoria was an adult, married, and making her own decisions. Still, that night something changed. We didn't realize how big it was until later. Sometimes I wonder if I missed signs. Victoria always pushed herself harder than she needed to, like she thought she had something to prove. Maybe deep down she never really felt like she belonged, and Robert's return gave her a fantasy she didn't want to let go of. Things stayed quiet for a few weeks, but then one Saturday Ryan came by alone to borrow some tools. We talked casually for a bit, and then he let slip that Victoria had been tired lately because of the baby. Diana froze and I stared at him. "She's pregnant?" I asked, shocked. Ryan froze, panic flooding his face. "Oh man, you didn't know?" His eyes widened with guilt and embarrassment. Realizing he'd accidentally exposed Victoria's deliberate secrecy, a sharp pain twisted in my chest. This wasn't forgetfulness. Victoria chose to keep us in the dark. Robert's fingerprints were all over this. He was already pulling strings, cutting us out piece by piece. That hurt deeply. She deliberately hadn't told us. Something felt off. Later that evening, Victoria called. Distant and awkward. Confirming the pregnancy, she said she meant to tell us but had been overwhelmed. Her voice felt detached, like speaking to strangers. We saw her soon after, 8 months along, smiling and joking, but clearly distant. Nothing like before. Robert's name never came up, but his shadow was everywhere. Around that same time, Robert started appearing more frequently in Victoria's life. He convinced her to name the baby Robert Jr. It felt like a gut punch. Like he was marking territory. Diana cried when she found out. I tried to keep it together, but the hurt was real. Robert also privately hinted to me that if he wasn't welcomed warmly, he'd consider legally pursuing visitation rights for the grandchild. It felt like blackmail, pure and simple. As if disappearing for 22 years could be erased. It wasn't just arrogant, it was laughable. But dangerous arrogance can still do damage. Ryan privately confessed Robert was pressuring him too, suggesting that his lack of enthusiastic support for Victoria's bonding with Robert might jeopardize Ryan's marriage. Robert was quietly manipulating everyone, but Victoria couldn't or wouldn't see it. We were all being pushed out by the ghost of a man who hadn't earned any place in our lives. The weeks leading up to the birth felt tense and distant. Every conversation with Victoria felt forced, every interaction shadowed by Robert's presence. Diana and I felt more and more like outsiders. In the family we'd built ourselves, the joy of anticipating our first grandchild was overshadowed by uncertainty and dread. Ryan became withdrawn, visibly stressed and exhausted. From trying to navigate the minefield Robert had created, he admitted he felt like walking on eggshells around Victoria, afraid that any disagreement might break their fragile peace. I wanted to support him, but I felt just as powerless. Finally, the day arrived when Victoria went into labor. We hoped, despite everything, that the baby's arrival might help heal some of the wounds Robert had opened. We had no idea how wrong we were. When Victoria went into labor, Diana and I waited anxiously at home, expecting we'd rush to the hospital as soon as possible. Hours passed without word, and our anxiety grew. When the phone finally rang, the baby had already arrived. Diana cried softly on the drive over, hurt we hadn't been included earlier. Walking into the hospital room, we froze at the sight. Robert comfortably sitting beside Victoria's bed, cradling my grandson as though he'd earned that right. My fist clenched involuntarily, anger and resentment flooding through me. Robert's eyes met mine with a smugness I recognized immediately. "Long time no see, Marcus," he drawled. I forced my voice steady. "You're holding my grandson." He raised an eyebrow, his smile cold. "Our grandson." Victoria lay in bed, exhausted but glowing, seemingly oblivious to the tension. She introduced the baby to us cheerfully, as though nothing unusual had happened. Diana held the baby briefly. Her joy mixed painfully with sorrow. The moment felt stolen, corrupted by Robert's presence. As Diana cooed softly to our grandson, Robert pulled me aside under the guise of friendly conversation. He leaned in, voice low. "Look, Marcus, I know you don't like me, but I'm here to stay. If you try to push me out, I'll make things complicated. Grandparents have rights, you know. See this, Marcus, it's about time I got my family back." "Took long enough," he smirked arrogantly, eyes gleaming with a sense of victory he didn't deserve. "You did a decent job stepping in. But blood is thicker, right?" His threat hung in the air, clear and unmistakable. Anger surged within me, but I kept my expression neutral. I couldn't give Robert the satisfaction of seeing he'd rattled me. I simply stared him down until he stepped back, pretending our exchange was casual banter. Ryan stood in the corner of the room, clearly uncomfortable. When our eyes met, I saw the same helplessness I felt. He nodded slightly, an unspoken acknowledgement of our shared discomfort. Diana gently returned the baby to Victoria. We excused ourselves shortly after, claiming not to want to overwhelm her. The drive home was silent, both of us lost in thought. Diana quietly wept, mourning the moment we'd envisioned for years, now forever tarnished. That night I lay awake replaying Robert's words, feeling helpless and angry. The family I'd fought so hard to build was slipping away, and I had no idea how to stop it. So after that, things only got worse. Robert didn't just fade away after his threat. He became more prominent, embedding himself deeper into Victoria's everyday life. She began skipping out on family dinners and gatherings, citing exhaustion or business as reasons. Each excuse felt hollow, but Diana and I tried to accept them, desperate not to push her further away. Our construction company, something I built specifically with Victoria's future in mind, started to suffer. Victoria had always been involved, passionate about taking it over one day. Now she hardly showed up, missing important meetings and leaving tasks unfinished. When I gently confronted her, she'd brush it off casually, claiming motherhood was her only priority now. Her detachment stung deeply. One evening after a particularly tough day at work, my phone rang. It was Victoria. Her voice was blunt, devoid of warmth. "I've decided to sell my shares, Marcus. Robert wants to invest, and I think he deserves a chance." My heart sank. Absolutely not, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. Victoria, he's manipulating you. He abandoned you, remember? Her reply was sharp, almost rehearsed. He's changed, he wants to make things right, and he has good ideas for the business. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Robert had wormed his way into Victoria's trust, turning her against the family that had always been there for her. Anger boiled inside me, but I kept my composure. He's playing you, Victoria. He doesn't deserve a penny from what we built together. She scoffed bitterly. We? It's always been yours. You've just been waiting to hand it to me as a reward for being the daughter you chose. Robert opened my eyes. It's always been yours, and you've been dangling it like a carrot, controlling me all along. My chest tightened in disbelief and anger. Victoria, that's Robert talking. He's poisoning your mind. This business was always built for you. No, she shot back coldly. Her words precise and cutting. Robert deserves a chance, and I'm giving it to him. End of story. The line went dead, leaving me stunned and hollow, betrayed beyond comprehension. Her words hit like a slap, painful and shocking. That's not fair, I managed to say, my voice thick. I've only ever wanted the best for you. She paused, and I could almost hear her hesitation. Before the cold edge returned, well, this is what's best for me now, whether you like it or not. After she hung up, I sat in stunned silence. Diana found me there staring blankly into space. When I explained what had happened, she broke down crying softly into my shoulder. We were losing Victoria piece by piece, to a man who didn't deserve her. But what Robert clearly didn't understand, and maybe Victoria forgot, is that this wasn't a lemonade stand. The company's bylaws required board approval for any share transfers. Always had. It was in the shareholder agreement. She signed when I gifted her the equity. She couldn't sell or assign control to anyone, let alone someone like Robert, without jumping through a legal minefield. The following day, Ryan showed up at our doorstep. Looking exhausted and defeated, he quietly admitted Victoria had lashed out at him for questioning the share transfer. Robert had warned Ryan explicitly that opposing him would mean risking his marriage. I'll testify, Ryan said firmly, surprising even himself. He's manipulating her, and if she won't see it, I'll be the one to say it out loud. I'm stuck, Marcus, Ryan whispered, visibly shaken. If I fight too hard, she'll walk away. But if I say nothing, she'll destroy everything you've built. His desperation mirrored my own. Robert had carefully set the stage, isolating each of us, making resistance feel impossible. But I knew surrender wasn't an option. I had worked too hard, loved too deeply, to let Robert back in and dismantle our family and our business. That night, Diana and I decided it was time to fight back. Legally, strategically, decisively. Robert might have won the first few battles, but we would make sure he wouldn't win the war. We wasted no time the next morning. I scheduled a meeting with Kevin, our family attorney. Kevin was a no-nonsense guy with a reputation for winning tough cases. He listened carefully as I laid out the entire situation, his expression hardening as the details unfolded. Kevin quickly began investigating Robert's background. Within days, he uncovered Robert's sketchy history, failed businesses, unpaid debts, and a trail of financial ruin he'd left behind. Kevin even secured evidence that Robert was already quietly approaching investors, promising them control and influence in our company, promises he had no right or authority to make. Armed with this information, Kevin advised me to document everything. He instructed me to keep track of every interaction Robert had with the company, every conversation Victoria had about the shares, and any possible manipulation attempts. I felt reassured having a clear plan, eased some of my anxiety. Kevin printed out one email chain where Robert literally wrote, "Once I'm in, I'll restructure operations. Our team is already in place. He's promising equity. He doesn't own Marcus," Kevin said, sliding the emails across the desk. "That's securities fraud. Investors can sue him or worse." That was all I needed to hear. This wasn't just manipulation. It was criminal stupidity. But Robert wasn't finished playing his games. He requested a private meeting, which I reluctantly agreed to, wanting to keep things civil for Victoria's sake. We met at a local diner, where Robert immediately dropped his friendly act. "Marcus," he began with false politeness. "We both know this doesn't have to get ugly." "It already is ugly," I said bluntly. Robert leaned forward, lowering his voice threateningly. "Look, fighting this publicly will only make you look bitter. Do you really want everyone thinking you're trying to deny Victoria her rightful inheritance?" My jaw tightened. Don't pretend you care about Victoria. You've only ever cared about yourself. Robert's smile turned icy. You underestimate me. I have no problem making sure everyone hears a different story. One where you're the controlling stepfather holding Victoria back. His threat was clear, but I refused to back down. I held his gaze, my voice steady and unflinching. You picked the wrong fight, Robert. You're going to regret this. After that confrontation, Kevin shut that threat down the moment I brought it up. He has no standing, he said flatly. A man who hasn't seen his daughter in 2 decades doesn't suddenly get rights to a child he's never met. That's not how the law works, Marcus. I knew it was an empty threat, but that didn't make it any less irritating. Kevin advised me to move quickly. We officially filed documents contesting Victoria's right to transfer shares without board approval. Robert responded with counterclaims, setting the stage for an intense legal battle. Meanwhile, Ryan struggled deeply at home. Victoria was becoming increasingly volatile, lashing out whenever he questioned Robert's motives. One evening, he showed up at our house again, visibly shaken and exhausted. She threatened to leave if I don't support her, Ryan confessed quietly, eyes filled with despair. I'm losing her, Marcus. Seeing his distress strengthened my resolve. Robert's manipulation wasn't just threatening our business. It was tearing apart the family we'd built. I promised Ryan we'd do everything possible to protect both him and Victoria from further harm. It was time for a line to be drawn, not just in court but at home. Kevin said we couldn't wait anymore, and for once I agreed with him fully. Victoria is bound by the same shareholder agreement as everyone else, Kevin reminded me. It's got a forced buyout clause for breach of fiduciary duty, and she's violated it 6 different ways. You're not firing your daughter. You're enforcing a contract. Kevin closed the file, hands folded, eyes locked on mine. I'm going to say this as plainly as I can, Marcus, he said, voice low and direct. If you want to protect the business, you have to remove her now, buy her out, freeze the shares, and tighten the bylaws permanently. Because if you don't, Robert's going to keep bleeding you dry through her. I didn't respond at first. I just stared at the papers spread across the desk. Profit-loss charts, project delays, shareholder tension, contracts. Victoria had ignored investor calls she'd skipped. I'd built this company from scratch, brick by brick, day by day. I started it, so she'd never have to struggle the way Diana and I did. And now I was sitting here being told that to save it, I had to sever her from it completely. Kevin leaned forward. You're a smart man, Marcus. You already know what I'm saying is true. You've given her chance after chance. She's not just unstable, she's compromised. And he's using her like a proxy. If she keeps ownership, he gets influence. He's already promised fake equity to outsiders. He's gambling with your life's work. I took a breath and let it out slowly. My jaw was clenched so tight it hurt. It'll destroy her, I said. If I take everything from her? Kevin cut in. She already gave it away? You're just cleaning up the wreckage. I sat back, swallowing a lump of bitterness. Memories flooded me. Her first day shadowing me in the office at 16, asking questions about construction planning, drawing out a new warehouse layout on a napkin, like it was the blueprint for her future. The pride I felt watching her step into boardrooms, the way I used to see myself in her ambition. But that version of Victoria didn't exist anymore. I nodded slowly, voice low. Do it, draft the papers. Full buyout, immediate freeze on her voting rights. Kevin gave a single nod, already opening a new folder. It's the right move. I'll have her served in 48 hours. Days passed, each filled with tense meetings and stressful planning. The legal procedures wore on all of us. Diana did her best to maintain a brave face, but I could see the toll it was taking. We held on to each other tightly, finding comfort and strength in our shared determination. Then came Victoria. She barged into my office. She was gripping the envelope Kevin had sent that morning. She must have ripped it open right there in the driveway, because the flap was shredded and the pages were bent, like she'd been squeezing them the whole way in. You're buying me out, she snapped. No hello, no conversation, just straight to the explosion. I didn't flinch. I stayed in my chair, hands folded, voice steady. I offered you a clean exit, one that protects the business, one that gives you financial security and saves face. She scoffed. Protect the business? You're protecting yourself. You just want me out of your life. No, Victoria, I said, calm but cold. I want Robert out of my business, and if that means separating you from it too, so be it. He's using you like a Trojan horse, and I'm not letting him inside my gates. She took a step closer, practically shaking with rage. "I'm not your enemy, Marcus." "Then stop acting like one," I shot back. "You brought him into board discussions. You leaked investor names to him. You gave him access to internal documents and offered him power in a company he never lifted a finger to build. That's not naivety anymore. That's sabotage." She looked stunned, hurt, but not apologetic. That was long gone. "I trusted him," she whispered. "He's my dad. And I'm the man who raised you," I said, finally standing. "Who paid for your braces? Who drove to your middle school play in the middle of a work crisis? Who taught you construction bottom lines, payroll cycles? And you threw that away for a man who called once and bought you coffee." She blinked like she was forcing back tears, or fighting to hold on to the story Robert had fed her. "You always made me feel like I had to earn everything, like I had to prove I was good enough for what you built." "You didn't have to prove anything," I said. "You just had to respect it. Respect me, respect the family. Instead, you brought a snake back into this house and handed him the keys." She paused. Something flickered across her face. "I'm not signing anything." I nodded. "I figured—" She straightened. "Robert says I have a legal right to those shares. He's talked to people, lawyers. He's not just winging this." I laughed. "Robert can talk to all the lawyers he wants. I've got Kevin, and what you're forgetting is that being right on paper doesn't make you right as a person." She stepped back like I'd slapped her, but I was done dancing around it. "You had a choice," I said. "I offered you a way out, a dignified one, but you're too far under his spell to see it. So now the gloves have come off." "I'll fight you," she whispered. I nodded. "Then I guess I'll see you in court." She stood there for another few seconds, as if waiting for me to take it back, to soften. I didn't. That man is gone. The one who built his world around her. The one who would have given her everything without hesitation. She buried him the day she let Robert into our boardroom. She turned and left without another word. Diana came around the corner a minute later, eyes red, clearly having heard most of it. "Did you mean it?" she asked. "Every word," I said. As the court date approached, Robert's threats intensified. He tried desperately to sway public opinion, spreading whispers about me being jealous and controlling. But Kevin remained unfazed, steadily preparing our case with precision and clarity. And when finally the day arrived, Diana squeezed my hand tightly as we entered the courtroom. Silently promising we'd face whatever came together, Robert sat across the room smug and confident. But I knew we were ready. This fight wasn't just for our business. It was for our family, and I intended to win. The courtroom felt cold and impersonal. As Diana and I took our seats, Kevin sat beside us organizing his notes. Across from us, Robert exuded a false confidence, leaning back casually, whispering occasionally to Victoria. She looked anxious, avoiding our eyes. Torn between loyalty and confusion, Ryan sat behind her, isolated and visibly troubled. When the judge entered, everyone stood briefly. Kevin began his presentation methodically, outlining every detail. Robert's deceptive attempts at infiltrating the company, his promises to unauthorized investors, and his manipulation of Victoria. Each point was reinforced by documented proof. Emails, recorded conversations, financial records. Kevin was precise and unwavering, leaving no room for doubt. Robert's attorney tried to paint me as controlling and possessive, claiming Robert was simply reconnecting with his daughter and legitimately trying to invest, but Kevin swiftly countered, presenting evidence of Robert's threats and manipulations, including Ryan's testimony detailing Robert's intimidation tactics and their devastating impact on his marriage. Kevin mentioned offhand that a few of Robert's would-be investors had quietly pulled out and were considering legal action. False promises, misrepresented positions. He might not be going to jail, but his reputation was circling the drain fast. Throughout the hearing, I kept glancing at Victoria. Seeing the pain and confusion on her face, part of me wished we weren't here, that we could resolve things privately as a family. But Robert had forced our hand. He'd made this courtroom confrontation inevitable. When it was Robert's turn to speak, he was smooth and rehearsed, painting himself as misunderstood, emphasizing his desire to support his daughter's future. But when Kevin cross-examined him, Robert's facade began to crumble. He stumbled over inconsistencies. Growing increasingly defensive under scrutiny, his temper surfaced, his responses becoming sharp and aggressive, revealing the true nature behind his charm. Victoria watched in disbelief, as Robert's carefully crafted image shattered publicly. Ryan reached out gently, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder, but she shrugged it off. The courtroom was sterile and still, like it hadn't seen real life in years. Diana sat next to me, her fingers laced through mine so tightly. It felt like she was anchoring me to the floor. Kevin sat at our side, calm as ever, flipping through a tabbed binder, like he was prepping for a routine inspection, not a war. "We're not here today because of a mistake," Kevin said. "We're here because my client extended every opportunity for resolution and was met with hostility, manipulation, and a blatant attempt to seize control of a private company under false pretenses." He slid a thick manila folder onto the judge's desk. "Included here is the formal buyout offer extended to Miss Victoria. Generous, legally sound, and documented before this court date was even set. It was rejected not with a counteroffer, not with negotiation, just flat refusal, backed by threats of litigation if we didn't hand over partial control to Mr. Robert, a man with no legal ties to the company, and no professional experience qualifying him for decision-making authority." The judge raised an eyebrow as he flipped through the documents. "This was sent prior to filing?" "Yes, Your Honor, October 15th. It was declined the same day." Kevin then laid out everything. The digital trail of Robert contacting outside investors, emails where he referred to our business with Victoria CC'd. Then came Ryan's testimony. Quiet, reluctant, but devastating. I told Ryan he didn't have to speak, that we'd understand, but he shook his head. "If I stay quiet, I'm letting that man win. I love Victoria, but I'm not going to lie for her father. Not after everything he's done. He threatened to ruin my marriage," Ryan said, voice shaking. "He said if I didn't support him, Victoria would see me as the reason her father was being locked out of her life. He told her what to say. She started quoting legal terms she didn't even understand. It was like she wasn't thinking for herself anymore." Robert's lawyer tried to paint the buyout as a coercive move, to disinherit a rightful successor, but Kevin fired back immediately. Miss Victoria was already a shareholder. She wasn't being removed arbitrarily. She was offered a clean exit because her behavior compromised the company's stability. My client wasn't severing a daughter. He was protecting a business from someone actively working with an outsider to undermine it. Then it was Robert's turn. And this was the part I had been waiting for. He walked to the stand like he was being awarded something. Confident, smiling. He even winked at Victoria as he passed. He tried the charm first, talking about reconnecting with family, how he saw a chance to be part of something meaningful. He said he guided Victoria through ideas for modernizing operations. Kevin let him talk. Then he got up and went for the throat. "You say you only wanted to help her?" "Yes." "You never asked for any money?" "No." "You never tried to influence ownership structure?" "No." Kevin smiled and reached into the file and pulled out a printed transcript. This was captured during a recorded call between Mr. Robert and one of the investors he approached without board approval. He said, sliding it to the judge. He pressed play on the audio clip. Robert's voice came through relaxed and arrogant. "Look, the buyout offer is meaningless. I've got Victoria on board. She'll vote how I tell her to. We're already planning next steps." "This guy can't stop us." Robert flinched. The courtroom went dead silent. Kevin let it hang in the air for a full 5 seconds. "Is that still your position?" Kevin asked, folding his hands. Robert's face tightened. "That was taken out of context. It's your voice. I was frustrated." Kevin leaned in. "You were arrogant and manipulative. You saw an opportunity to walk into something you didn't build, and take a piece of it because you thought no one would stop you." That's when Robert cracked. His tone shifted. The charm dropped. "You think this guy deserves it all?" He snapped, gesturing to me. "She's my kid, my blood. I have a right to be involved. He's just a stand-in, a fill-in-the-gap stepdad with a superiority complex." The judge leaned forward. "That's enough, Mr. Robert." When the judge returned after a short recess, his tone was sharp and final. "The court finds that Miss Victoria cannot transfer or assign her shares without explicit board approval. Furthermore, Mr. Robert has no standing in this company, legally or professionally, and his involvement constitutes an attempt to interfere in the governance of a private business. The evidence demonstrates a pattern of manipulation, coercion, and misrepresentation. Mr. Harper's claims are dismissed permanently." Bang, that was it. The bailiff moved in fast and ushered Robert out, still muttering curses under his breath. As we stood to leave, Robert exploded in rage, confronting Victoria openly. "This is your fault, you promised me control. And now look at this mess you've created." His harsh words echoed through the courtroom, shattering any remaining illusions Victoria had about him. Victoria stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. Ryan stepped protectively between her and Robert. Gently guiding her away, Robert stormed out, his angry threats still lingering in the air. I felt no satisfaction in his defeat, only sorrow for the damage he'd caused. The courtroom fell into shocked silence. Victoria stared at Robert, eyes wide with disbelief, visibly shaken. Her voice came out faint, wounded. "Robert, what are you saying?" We had barely stepped outside the courthouse when Robert stormed toward us, his face contorted in bitter rage. He didn't hesitate before unleashing on Victoria, loud enough for the gathered onlookers to hear. "You're worthless, Victoria," he shouted viciously. "I wasted months pretending to care about you, and for what? You couldn't even deliver your end of the deal? I deserved better than a weak, gullible daughter like you. You're pathetic." Victoria recoiled as though physically struck, staggering backward as she shook her head desperately. Her eyes filled rapidly with tears, voice cracking with raw anguish. "Stop it, Robert, stop lying. You said you loved me. I gave you everything." He sneered openly, laughing cruelly at her distress. "Loved you? I barely knew you. And from what I've seen, you're not worth knowing. You're just as pathetic now as when I left you the first time." At that, Victoria completely unraveled. She lunged forward, tears streaming uncontrollably, her voice rising to a frantic, shattered scream. "You're a monster. How could you do this? You promised, you lied, you ruined everything." She crumbled to her knees, sobbing violently, her screams dissolving into heart-wrenching cries. That echoed painfully through the courtyard. Ryan rushed to kneel beside her, pulling her gently into his arms. "Victoria, please, it's over." "He's not worth it." Robert stepped back with cold indifference, disgust clear on his face as he turned away. "Good luck picking up those pieces," he spat dismissively, striding away without another glance. I stood frozen, fists clenched, breathing heavily. Diana clung to my arm, trembling in shock. We watched helplessly as Victoria broke down completely, finally seeing the horrifying truth about the man she'd chosen over the family who had always been there for her. Victoria approached Diana and me slowly, her expression broken and remorseful. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I didn't realize, I didn't see." I looked at her, heart heavy with sadness. "We tried to warn you, Victoria. We wanted to protect you." She nodded weakly, tears falling freely. Diana embraced her softly, whispering comforting words. I stepped back slightly, giving them space, feeling both relief and profound sorrow. This victory felt hollow, overshadowed by the fractures left within our family. In the weeks following the trial, Robert disappeared, leaving behind a trail of unpaid debts and broken promises. Victoria began counseling, working to repair the damage done to her marriage and family relationships. Ryan stood by her, patient and supportive, determined to rebuild their life together. Our business slowly stabilized, free from Robert's interference, but the emotional scars remained deep and painful. Trust had been damaged, relationships strained. Diana and I leaned heavily on each other, drawing strength from our bond. One evening, Victoria came by, nervous but resolute. We talked openly for the first time since everything had unraveled. She acknowledged the hurt she'd caused, accepting responsibility for her actions. I listened quietly, seeing genuine regret in her eyes. "I can't change what happened," she admitted softly, "but I want to try to rebuild." She looked up at me, eyes bloodshot. "I let him use me. I didn't see it until it was too late. I lost the company. I nearly lost my marriage, and I don't even know if I deserve to be here." "You don't," I said evenly. I looked directly at Victoria, making sure there was no room for misunderstanding. My tone was firm and uncompromising. "You can come here, you can see your mom. You'll be treated with basic respect, but don't mistake that for reconciliation." She stared at me, not sure what she was hearing. I didn't build my life around raising someone else's child, just to be told it didn't matter. "You gave everything we built to a man who vanished. The second life got hard, and then you defended him while he tried to take everything I protected. That wasn't just a mistake, Victoria." She sobbed quietly, head in her hands. Diana sat beside her, silently rubbing her back, tears in her own eyes. I let them have their moment, but when Victoria finally looked at me again, I spoke clearly. The only reason we'll still share a room now and then is because of your mother? For her sake, I'll be civil. For her sake, I'll be polite. But don't expect anything more from me. I'm done pretending this is something it's not." Victoria opened her mouth slightly, as if about to speak, then closed it. Realizing the weight of what I just laid out, her eyes filled, but I held her gaze steadily. Refusing to soften my stance, she nodded slowly, tears glistening, but not falling. There were no further objections, no pleas for reconsideration. Victoria had finally understood the severity of what she'd lost, and why she'd lost it. In the months that followed, life moved forward, but never back to what it once was. Family dinners resumed, though more quietly, marked by careful conversation and guarded interactions. Victoria visited often enough. But we spoke about safe topics. Weather, movies, the baby. Never again about the business or the wounds she'd inflicted. Laughter still came occasionally. But it was cautious, tempered by the awareness of lines drawn, and trust forever altered. Ryan made attempts to bridge the gap, but he eventually accepted the new reality. He knew where I stood. Respecting my boundaries without question, Victoria herself seemed quietly resigned, understanding that our relationship had fundamentally changed. We still showed up when it mattered. But the easy warmth, the father-daughter bond built on unconditional trust, was permanently diminished. It was a new normal, colder and harder but honest. The scars from Robert's poison ran deep, a constant reminder of the choices Victoria made and the man I had become.